can't think of anything worse than losing a child. A previous guest on the show, award-winning actor Jason Watkins, talked on this podcast about losing his 2.5-year-old daughter Maudie to sepsis. The pain must be unbearable. Child Bereavement UK is a quite brilliant charity that supports children, young people, parents and families when either a child grieves or a child dies. For the last 3 years, my daughters and I have had the privilege of singing at their annual carol concert in December, and the outpouring of thanks from parents and families about how child bereavement has supported them and continues to support them in the worst of all circumstances is truly humbling, moving, and inspiring. If you know of someone in these circumstances who needs their help, or if you'd like to support the work that they do, either by donating or giving your time, please contact them via their website, www.childbereavementuk.org. Every penny and every effort will make a difference. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Bandwidth Conversations, a podcast that finds out about the stories and journeys of artists, performers and rock stars of life. My guest today is all of these things. When people say to me they want to be an actor, or if they say they want to be a musician, I think to myself, well, good luck with that, because it is so competitive, so hard to get anywhere. But my guest today has achieved both. He's a hugely successful actor and singer. He's performed on screen in some of our most celebrated and best-loved television shows and films, Downton Abbey, The Crown, Bridgerton, to name but 3. He frequently performs on stage in a wide-ranging variety of plays, musicals and concerts, from the West End to the Royal Albert Hall to Broadway and back, taking the odd detour to Windsor Castle, which we will come back to. He has also recorded 5 albums. He is one of the most multi-talented and versatile performers out there. I've watched him in a fair few of his roles and have been a long-standing fan, so it is no wonder that I've been so looking forward to talking today to Julian Ovenden. Thank you so much for being here, Julian.
That's a very, very nice introduction. Thank you.
You were born in Sheffield. You're one of 3 children. Your father was a vicar and actually became the Queen's vicar. How old were you when you started singing?
That's a good question. I went to a choir school when I was 7, just 7.
That was St Paul's
Cathedral bang in the centre of London. And at that stage, my parents were in Ely, near Cambridge. And so I must have shown some kind of musical leaning at that before that stage. I do have memories of my dad teaching me sort of like an audition piece to get into the school. And I remember being taken probably age 5 or 6 to the director of music in London, which seemed like a fairy tale place, to audition for the school. And it was a school that my dad himself had been to when he was a child. He was a chorister there. For them, it was a way of giving me a kind of musical grounding, musical education. They didn't have any money, really. My mum's a teacher, and my dad, as you said, was a vicar. So yeah, they thought it was a great opportunity for me. But I have no idea when I started. I learned the piano, I remember that, before I went, and the trumpet. They weren't like tiger parents. They weren't like chaining me to the instruments and like, you got to do this, you got to do that. But I guess I must have showed some kind of thing.
Yeah. Were you boarding then at St Paul's?
Yes.
So that was boarding from 7, which is little. You're little to be boarding. And how did you find that?
Well, that's a whole podcast in itself, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, I sort of envisaged this podcast to be full of funny anecdotes and like hilarious. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't great, let's be honest. It's not something, I mean, I've talked to lots of people about it, but I've never really talked publicly about it. Maybe I should. Maybe this is the time. Okay. Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, musically brilliant. I mean, amazing experience, because you're basically becoming a professional musician really, really early on in your life. And you're exposed to amazing musicians, and you're working 2-3 hours a day as a musician. And not only in a choir, but also kind of your instrumental sort of stuff. So that was incredible. And touring, we toured places and did amazing concerts. And you learned discipline, you learned an amazing repertoire of music, singing in St Paul's Cathedral, which is one of the most beautiful buildings in London, maybe in England. I remember being dropped off and feeling completely at sea. at that age. You know, I have kids of my own. If I think of that, it's sort of unbearable to think of.
Yes.
But I don't blame my parents. That was what you did, you know, and like if you wanted your kids to have an interesting education, that was, I suppose, the price you paid. But the school, without going into too much horrible detail, the school was full of sadistic, horrible predators, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. So it wasn't the nicest time.
And did you tell your parents?
Yeah, much later on. But of course, all that sort of stuff, when that happens to you as a child, you have no idea. You have no idea what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad. You just deal with it. It's a bit like being in a war zone.
Yes.
You shut down to some degree if you're abused. Oh God, this is really getting. This is.
Oh my gosh, Julian, I'm so sorry.
No, it's great. You don't have to apologize. It's important. I think it's important to talk about. Now I'm the age that I am. A lot of men who'd been through this thing. I mean, obviously women, we've been through a whole, you know, the last 10 years has been about women speaking up to power. You know, I worked with Weinstein for 2.5 years, and I saw a lot of that kind of dynamic of people just afraid of confronting power. And thankfully, due to some amazing bravery on behalf of, you know, a handful of women, it changed it and it tipped the balance. And suddenly we were encouraged, women were encouraged to stand up, and men were encouraged on behalf of women, but also on behalf of themselves.
Yes.
And so there are a lot of every week or every month you're reading about new cases of people who are coming into their midlife and trying to work out, why do I behave like this? Why do I have issues with authority? Why do I have issues with intimacy? Or why do I have issues with relationships in some way? And of course, a lot of it stems from the fact that they were, you know, abused.
Yes.
And left out to dry, really, when they were kids. It's one of the reasons why I became an actor, because from the age of 8 to 12 or whatever, my emotional life was in a way put on hold. You had to sort of put on a suit of armor to some degree, even though I had an escape, which was music. The feeling of being a kid, of being free, of being safe, those feelings I did not have. My path to becoming a performer and path becoming certainly an actor was like getting in touch with those feelings that I lost or that were cut off. And so now I feel more like a kid than I did when I was, you know, 10 or whatever, because I was very grown up and quite mature and quite sensible. And now I'm none of those things, hopefully. I want to underline the fact that I don't blame my parents because they didn't know. And then when they found out, I think they found out because one of my first girlfriends told them, interestingly enough.
Wow.
So they found out much, much later on. And so for them, it's not good. Feelings of guilt, presumably, even though they weren't responsible.
So you've had some therapy.
I've had lots of therapy.
What made you realize that you needed help?
Okay, that's interesting. I suppose it was, you know, I went to all boys' schools. So I went to St. Paul's and I went to Eton afterwards. And I loved Eton. I'm the least successful old Etonian actor working today. But
I can't imagine that. Just don't know about
I wear that as a badge of honour. The only one without an Oscar, probably. But
there's plenty of time.
There is plenty of time. But I think I was interested something about sort of self-analysis or looking inward, I think. And the early relationships with girls that I had, because I was desperate to meet girls. One of the reasons I did shows at school because that was the only way to meet girls.
Yes, that's true.
So I'm sure there was part of me that wanted to perform, but there was other part of me that just wanted to be in the same room as a woman. And I'm sure that's common to many, many people at single-sex education. But I think, some of the early relationships I had were very instrumental in kind of awakening that side of me and like, what happened and why do I behave in a certain way? So, therapy is something that I've come in and out of many times in my life. And also doing what I do, it kind of forces you to look inward a lot of the time and to question yourself, and you're being aware of your own behavior in contrast to someone else's behavior, not to be judgmental. I feel like because I kind of faced what I consider sort of evil, I suppose.
Yes.
So early on in my life, and was able to survive to some degree. It does give you a sense of resilience, and it does give you a sense of strength that makes you feel sort of invincible, because nothing is as bad as that. Nothing can be as bad as that.
No.
I felt like I struggled to empathize because I'd cut that part of my emotional life out, in a way, to survive.
Yes.
Because if I did start to think about what was going on, we had a telephone at the school, and we were allowed 10 minutes on the telephone every, I don't know, I can't remember. You had those phone, do you remember those phone cards?
Yes, I do remember those phone cards.
So I remember it used to be 50p or 20p or whatever it was, but then the phone cards came on. And there was, I remember, on the sort of board of the telephone, there was a child line sticker. It always sort of burned into my memory. And the number underneath it was the Esther Rantzen kind of thing, I think, that she'd sort of pioneered.
Yeah.
But of course, at that stage, there was no there was no one telling, no one knew. No one, it was just what was going on. It was just the way that the world was. And for an 8-year-old boy away from home, you just don't judge. You just go, okay, well, this is what I have to put up with, like being beaten or whatever, or what are the other things that, are horrible things that happen in those schools.
No, that's true. You'd have no idea that if you said something, it could stop.
No, you have no idea. But what subsequently it's given me is, I hope, a greater sense of understanding, a greater sense of empathy, trying to be nice to people, kind, considerate, maybe sometimes to my detriment, actually, I think, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I tried to be a good human being as much as I can.
And so when you went to Eton, did you think, oh, this is going to be more of the same? Or did you have any hopes that things were going to change?
I just certainly felt a relief to get out of that environment and get out of the orbit of this one person. So that was definitely a relief.
Oh, so it was one person.
For me, it was, well, there were a few, but in terms of like the really, really bad stuff that happened to me, there was just one person.
Gosh, I'm so sorry. That's awful.
It's awful, but awful things happen to everyone, okay? At the end of the day, awful things happen to everyone. I mean, life is a pretty good leveler. There's not many people you can meet after 50 years of life and go, it's been a breeze. Nothing bad happened. It's how you kind of pick yourself up and how you deal with it. And through various ways and various decisions in my life, I kind of been able to sort of deal with it. And I'm proud of that. And I think that I subscribe to that school of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I've tried, those experiences have given me inversely, they've given me an awful lot, because as an artist, those sort of things are quite powerful, and powerful drives and powerful emotions. And that's what you're dealing with as an actor or as a singer or as an artist in some way. You're facing up to a lot of uncomfortable things. You should be, I think, if you want to keep challenging yourself and keep connected to yourself. So in some ways, you have to be at peace with it as much as you can and use it and warn against it, which I guess is what I'm doing by speaking about it because I've never really spoken about it. Weirdly, isn't it funny that I should suddenly...
The more people share these stories, the more people realize that you can speak to someone.
I mean, certainly it's obviously something I talk to my own kids about, although they don't really, unless they listen to this, they don't really know exactly what happened to me. But I think you're right.
It's really lovely to share it, because then it makes people not feel so alone. And I think there must be a lot of people out there who still haven't told anyone about it.
Hundreds and thousands, I'm sure thousands and thousands.
And that's going to just completely play out in their life.
Yeah, and not just at schools, but in toxic relationships or in relationships in the workplace and all those sort of things. It's important to be able to speak. There is obviously a kind of a flip side to that some people think the world's gone mad and that we're afraid of everything now. The TV job that I've just been working on, in typical American fashion, there's a placard in every trailer and every sort of, when you go to the coffee station or whatever, in between a scene or whatever. And it's like the anonymous hotline. And if you feel in a state of some kind of you're supposed to ring these hotlines, and so it becomes a running joke between actors or producers and stuff like that. If anything happens, he's like, right, I'm going to ring the hotline. But I think that, as you say, I think that it's important to acknowledge these things happened, and thankfully schools are generally in a far, far better place than they were, and we're much more evolved in our thank goodness, in our thinking and our approach to mental health and all the rest of it.
So you went to Eton.
I did.
It was a better experience.
It was great. I had a great time.
And were you taught by Ralph Allwood?
I was. He was so I was a music scholar, so I got all my fees were paid for, which was kind of amazing. So I went there on a full scholarship. And I did an exam and stuff like that. And I didn't really have any idea what it was. I didn't know anything about the school at all, really. And I just turned up and, from a school of 35, suddenly it was a school of 1,200 people, but a whole different world to what I was used to. And in my house of 50 boys, because the school is divided into houses, were the most extraordinary collection of exotic people. I mean, very privileged, but, like in the next door room was the Crown Prince of Kuwait.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, who by that stage had 5 wives.
At the age of 13?
No, he was like 17. He was about to leave. He was in the 6th form. So he had a moustache, which I thought was incredible.
Yeah, crazy.
And he had 5 wives back in Kuwait, not in the same room in the school. But he was great. He left halfway through the year because Kuwait got invaded by Iraq. So he had to go back and lead the army.
Wow.
But there was amazing, like princes, politicians' sons, and who was else on my corridor? Tom Parker Bowles was on my corridor. Freddie Windsor, a lot of old England, but a lot of new money, a lot of European money. In a way, I felt like I didn't fit in. I felt like I was an outsider to some degree. But there were quite a lot of kids on scholarships and sort of people that were from the same kind of background that I was from. But you just sort of got on with it, and you just sort of, and I made good friends, and I had it's an amazing school, and I'm sure it's even better now, but it gave you opportunities that were extraordinary, amazing teaching. And I loved it because I was interested in lots of things. So for me, it was like brilliant.
You then moved to New College, which is why we're speaking today.
Yes.
And you were a choral scholar at New College. And I don't know if you ever came across Toby Spence.
Yeah, he's worked with my wife my wife's an opera singer, so I know Toby. They've done a few shows together.
Oh,
so
right.
So I know Toby very well, yeah.
So he had quite an unorthodox admissions process at New College. In his words, he wasn't really good enough to get into New College, but he had this wonderful voice. Right, yeah. But I think Edward Higginbottom said at one stage when he was trying to get him to play the piano or do a harmony or something, and he was sort of under his breath, he was saying, how am I going to get Toby in? How am I going to get him in? So they did accept him, and then they organised for him to have lessons so that he would be up to speed when he started. But he was very self-deprecating about the fact that he said, I shouldn't really been there.
I think a lot of us in that sort of situation felt a little bit the same. I felt like it was a little bit of a kind of backdoor way in to Oxford. And I really didn't do too much work. As you mentioned, Edward Higginbottom, who was an amazing conductor, who ran the choir, but is a brilliant, brilliant musician. I learned an awful lot from him and a great inspiration. I remember our first tutorial where we were sort of sitting in his offices in the quad in New College, and we was like, well, what lectures should we go to? And he was like, oh no, don't bother about lectures. I wouldn't go to those. So we didn't. We just didn't go. I went to maybe 4 lectures in 3 years. I mean, nowadays, you can't get away with that kind of behavior. But then it was like, somehow I got through it. Not quite sure, doing very, very little work. I mean, I was busy because I was doing loads and loads of other things. Drama stuff and musical stuff and singing with the choir all over the world because we toured everywhere. So a lot of the time we weren't actually in Oxford.
Were you still enjoying your singing at that time?
I loved it. I loved that whole feeling of being in a choir. Yeah, I've always loved that. And I miss it because I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But that sort of feeling of like that sort of togetherness, I really, really enjoyed. And it was just a good laugh. And working with great orchestras and playing amazing concert halls. It was great. It was really, really fun. But in terms of my academic side of things, Edward knew I wasn't going to be a musicologist. And he was very kind of cool about it. He was very like, as long as I was able just to manage to pass the kind of yearly sort of thing. I remember I got offered a tour of American with the Cambridge Drama Society. A friend of mine was doing a production of As You Like It to tour around American colleges on the East Coast in my first year. And it clashed with a concert tour somewhere in Europe. And I remember going to Ed thinking, oh God, it was my first year. Maybe this is a bit cheeky to ask. I said, like, I've just been offered this thing. It's like 3 weeks in America playing a great role in a Shakespeare. And he was like, oh no, you should do it. You should definitely do it. And so he gave me the opportunity to do that when really I was being paid kind of to be there doing something else.
Yes.
And off I went with a whole load of Cambridge actors to do this amazing experience. I was really, really busy. He understood that there were other important things in your life. And you should be getting drunk and you should be having relationships and you should be kind of misbehaving to some degree.
Yes.
It's really important. He had 6 kids, I think. And I went out with his daughter for a couple of years.
Did you?
Yeah. So I had more of an insight into his thinking, but he was a great guy. And yeah, I feel like there were important years in many respects to sort of just find out who I was. Oxford felt much, much more of a kind of opening for me. Lots of different people from different walks of life, all with a sense of curiosity, all wanting to sort of challenge themselves, to sort of broaden their horizons and broaden the horizons of the world to some degree. And I found it the most stimulating place. And also it was just fun.
If you could pick one memory of New College.
I seem to remember driving someone's car and parking it. This is the kind of thing that you get into. You're driving someone's car and parking it into the middle of like the garden
I didn't know
quad.
what you were going to park.
Yeah, somewhere like really bad. Or then that old trick of turning someone's room upside down, or like getting someone drunk. This is terrible. I can't believe we did this. Getting someone drunk and then like recreating their room.
Outside or
like in another room. Yeah. So they were really, really confused. All those sort of ridiculous things you did.
Yeah.
You know, really bad alcohol-induced kind of misbehavior. There's a lot of that.
I remember there was a drinking society. Called Pre-Prandials.
Okay.
Did you ever? They'd obviously been shut down then by the time you arrived.
Now, yeah.
And there was a dinner or whatever, and everyone had drunk a reasonable amount. And I thought I would surprise a friend of mine by creeping up on him just near the mound.
So I remember that thing. Yeah.
And he was sort of moving around. I kind of didn't realize that he was swinging a gin bottle. And so he turned round and whacked me across the face and causing my front tooth to fall out. And unfortunately, I had this huge crush on this person. We were just dating.
Oh, no, really?
And I was like, oh no. My God. He's going to ditch me on the spot.
No, really? That's horrible.
And I had that was a shame.
I remember like walking around the garden bit, which is beautiful in New College, like just before my finals and trying to cram sort of 3 years worth of work into my brain. Thinking if I just keep wandering around, it's like 3 hours before it was somehow kind of going to get into my skull. I don't know how I passed a degree, but I did. But I had a lovely time.
After that, you went on to Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art. And I heard in your brilliant Talking Classical podcast with Annabelle Lee that at that stage, you still hadn't decided whether acting was for you.
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I have no idea. I mean, a lot of actors, when they're interviewed, they they come out of the womb singing Sondheim, or like they knew that they were going to play Shakespeare. Or it was like from age 3, he was already, he'd committed Othello.
Yes.
I had no real idea. I kind of knew I sort of wanted to perform. I knew that. I think I was definitely drawn to that world, but I didn't know in what way. And I didn't want to go to music college. And I think the world of sort of classical music, there would have been another 4 or 5 years of training at a conservatoire or a music college. And I was like, I just want to get going. I want to get out there and do stuff. I really felt that. And so I decided to go to drama school, and I auditioned for quite a few places and got into a few. But some of the courses were like 2 or 3 years. And I was like, I want to do another 3 years of institutions. I'd been in an institution for 11 years, more than 11 years, like 13 years, 12 years. I want to get out, I want to do stuff. And yeah, so Webber Douglas, which doesn't exist anymore, but was one of the oldest drama schools in London, which is great, a great drama school just off the Gloucester Road. And I went there for a postgrad degree, and it was like 12 of us in my year. And it's quite a small place, sort of falling down at that stage, sort of quite eccentric, full of a lot of eccentric teachers. And I was like, oh, these are the kind of people that, My dad at that stage, we'd moved to Primrose Hill. And he was, in those days, it was full of directors and actors. And someone put me in touch with an amazing producer called Thelma Holt, because I didn't have any money to sort of fund the course. So I went to her offices in the Aldwych, and it was about 4:00 in the afternoon. And she said to me, she sort of read what I'd written, and we talked for a bit. And she said, would you like something to drink? I said, yeah, I'd love something to drink. Got out a bottle of vodka, and we drank a bottle of vodka.
That's really
and I
impressive.
don't like vodka. I mean, but I was still thinking, oh, is this what happened? This is what one does. And she would just regale me theatrical stories. And just for people who know her, this is totally a just normal event. But she had to put me in a cab because I was almost paralytic drunk. Put me in a cab. Anyway, the next morning she phoned me and I was horrifically hungover. And she got me the money within a day.
Wow.
She got me like £10,000 or something like that for my year's training. I don't exactly know how, but her and people like Alan Rickman and Richard Wilson, who actually gave me some money as well. She had a kind of coterie of people, and also an amazing guy called Gray Gowrie, who used to run the Arts Council. Those sort of people were brilliant at finding money for young actors and young talent. Yeah, so she did that. And then I was off, and I was in this drama school, and I was loving it. I think for the first time in my life, I felt like I was with the people I was supposed to be with.
After that, when was your first big break?
Thelma Holt, she got me into the Royal Shakespeare Company the month I left drama school.
Oh, my goodness.
Which
so
was
that was
really
straight
handy.
away.
So straight in. And then it was an amazing production of King Lear with Nigel Hawthorne in Japan with a Japanese director. And then it came back to the Barbican. But I was playing like a tree or something. I was really, I had very,
You were on the stage.
I was on the stage. I was sort of part of the scenery, really. But I learned a lot. And then, pretty quickly after that, my second job was a musical at the Donmar Warehouse.
That was Merrily We Roll Along.
Yeah.
And you were the lead in that.
I was, yeah. And that sort of started me off. It exposed me to Sondheim, which I wasn't really aware of. And suddenly working with him in a rehearsal room. And that whole experience, especially that theatre, was such a special theatre. And
that's my favourite
in those days
theatre.
it was, it still is a great place to work. But in those days, it was the place to work. Because Sam was running it at that stage, and Michael Grandage, who had directed, they were the hot directors. It was like Nicole Kidman doing The Blue Room. It was like amazing productions that were going on there, and everyone wanted to work there. And suddenly I got given this opportunity of doing this show, which I didn't know anything about. And I remember being sent the script, Merrily We Roll. I said, it sounds like an awful title. My agent at the time was like, no, you really have to read it. You really have to do it. And it is the most amazing piece of, I don't know whether you know it.
I do know it. I didn't see you in it, sadly.
It's the most amazing piece of writing because it's all about getting older as an artist and how your sort of dreams and your ambitions change as you get older and how you manage that. It's a fantastic piece of work. And it was an amazing opportunity, I suppose, because it's one of those pieces that affects people. And if I think of the experiences I've had as a performer, those are the jobs that I cherish and those are the jobs that I'm drawn to. And of course, one has to earn money and one has to feel like your career is sort of moving forwards. And so you choose things for different reasons. But I'd love just to be able to choose those kinds of... But at that stage, we were earning £375 a week or something like that. But it was just magical.
And that must have felt very much like your breakthrough moment.
I suppose it did. I got a lot of attention for it and I got articles and suddenly people were talking and people were coming to see me and offering me things.
Now we're talking about theatre. My Night with Reg.
Oh, yeah.
I can barely remember my children's names nowadays, and let alone theatre productions I've been to see. But I will always remember My Night with Reg because it was one of the best things I've ever seen. For those who haven't seen it, it's a bittersweet tale in the 1980s when AIDS was this new disease that was decimating, in particular, the gay community.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I remember just that when I was in my mid to late teens, so it kind of felt really frightening around that time. In My Night with Reg, you never see Reg. No. It's just a bunch of friends who have all had a night with Reg with devastating consequences. And you were the lead role in that. I mean, I'm making it sound as if it was really heartbreaking, but it was hysterically funny. All the characters were just adorable. There was a bit where you danced to Starman, David Bowie, and I remember that was just such a wonderful scene that I then played him kind of in a loop for weeks afterwards. How was that for you, that production?
Yeah, I'm getting sort of emotional just thinking about it, really. It was a very important production in many ways for me, because I think up to that point, or around that point, I think I'd been more of a thinking actor. And I was always sort of jealous of people who were able to sort of tap into their emotions so freely. And maybe that's part of why I chose that role, to be more emotional, perhaps more connected to my emotions. And certainly that role and that piece, I sort of unlocked something within me, I think. I'd seen the original production before I became an actor with John Sessions. It started at the Court, and then it was at the Criterion, and Anthony Carff and John Sessions and David Bamber, who played the three big roles. And I remember thinking, wow, this is just the most amazing piece, because it's so funny.
It is.
And then,
yeah,
it sort of rips your heart out.
Yes.
And those sort of pieces I just sort of love, because it's so cleverly written. And we had such a blast doing it and made amazing friends doing that job. And in that special theatre, it sort of changed me as a performer and changed me as an actor, which is kind of what you want to do, where you want to be doing jobs that, how amazing it is to be doing a job that sort of changes you and deepens you.
Yes.
It was a blast. And it was also very, very difficult. I had to take my clothes off.
Yes, you did.
It's one thing doing that on stage, but doing it at the Donmar warehouse, where basically
people can touch you.
They can basically. Yeah, there's not really much.
I didn't see you at the Donmar. I saw you when it went to the West End.
Yeah, at the Donmar, it was a very special thing because you were basically in the room with them. They were part of the sort of party atmosphere of it.
All About Eve,
yeah,
which I sadly didn't see. But you have your co-stars are Gillian Anderson and Lily James, and you play Bill Sampson, Margot's egocentric but loving partner.
Yeah,
it had amazing reviews, and you had amazing reviews.
Did I? I don't read them. But
don't you read them? You did. Got really good reviews. The cast members, you're with each other night after night for months. I guess you end up feeling like family by the end of it. Could you sort of explain, for someone who doesn't act and has never had that experience, sort of what that dynamic feels like?
It's an interesting thing, because what you're doing is, I suppose, quite unnatural. And in that particular experience, we were working with the director, Ivo van Hove, who is much more of an auteur, and he has a vision for something, whereas some directors are very sympathetic to actors and very like, oh, you have to take your time and you do it in. So we had 3 weeks rehearsal, which is very, very short.
Wow, that is short.
We barely had a dress rehearsal, and we were straight in front of an audience. We were under-rehearsed. And there were some really good actors in that show. Monica Dolan, who's one of my favourite actors who I worked with a number of times, who's tremendous and just getting the recognition that she deserves. And lots of great people. But when you're faced with that kind of level of fear, and Gillian, for example, was terrified. She uses that fear, as we all do, in great ways. And also she was playing a character that was in a way fearful herself, or fearful of her getting old. And so you kind of rely on each other, and you do become the sort of slightly dysfunctional family. You become each other's therapists. You're aware of what's going on in their lives. You know what they eat. It's like being in a relationship with 12 people. Even more so when you're on location with people, because you're away from your family. There's nowhere else to escape to. You're all stuck in wherever it is, in a hotel or in apartments, wherever, in a foreign country, and you're reliant on, unless you're very, very singular and very sorted, I suppose. You're like, well, where should we eat? Or what's going on? And what are we doing tonight? Otherwise you go mad.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing, because you make friends really, really quickly. And one of the lovely things about it is, like, you make friends with people you wouldn't necessarily have made friends with. People from completely different walks of life. Completely different ages.
Yes.
So what I love when I reference feeling like I'm 21, I still feel like a kid because I start a job and I'm like, I don't see any difference between someone who's 18 and who's someone who's 80. There's an affinity between actors. There is that non-judgmental, being open and wanting to explore, wanting to taste something different, wanting to understand someone else, wanting to be, especially in the world we live in, where we're often not physically in touch with people. We're doing a lot of things on screen, a lot of things through portals and virtual world. Actually being in the same room and hugging someone or saying, how are you? What's going on in your life? It's a really amazing thing. And me and Julian, we were on stage the whole time on that show, which is a fucking nightmare. Because you can't go off, you can't like...
have a drink of water.
You can't, it's like, oh, Jesus. It's really annoying. And so whenever a director says, we're all going to be on stage the whole time, so everyone's going, oh, fuck's sake. So, but there was a little corner that me and Gillian had to have like this crazy quick change. And then we'd sit with our backs to the audience, kind of, and we were slightly sort of hidden. And we used to play Scrabble.
Did you?
Yeah, we used to play Scrabble. And quite intimately, because like she's suddenly changing to sort of underwear and I'm basically naked apart from a pair, you know, whatever. Yeah. And it's like, so you're really sort of forced into this sort of very kind of close proximity with people. And we used to play Scrabble for a bit on like a magnetic board.
Yes, I love Scrabble.
But I also remember there was one night where Liverpool were playing, I'm a big Liverpool supporter, and Liverpool were in the Champions League quarterfinal or the semi-final, I can't remember, and playing Barcelona. We were 3-0 down in the first leg and Barcelona were coming to Liverpool. And I smuggled my phone in to stage, which is really, really bad. It's a really, really bad thing to do.
That wasn't the day maybe when the reviewers came.
No, I think we were deep into the run at this stage. And I kept checking the score. And we scored like 2 goals and it was like the last 5 minutes. And we were supposed to go on for the curtain call. I just glued, and she saw that she said, just don't bother, just stay there. And I watched the last 5 minutes while everyone was just taking the curtain call. I watched where is he? Like no one would have cared. They were only really there for Julian and Lily. Being in the theatre, especially with a group of people, is just so fun. It's just the best fun.
And if you had to choose just one of those media, like theatre versus film, would you choose theatre? I
would choose theatre. I mean, I've had amazing experiences. I mean, film less so because I haven't done an awful lot of film, but TV, I've done a lot of TV. And I've had great fun and been on amazing shows with amazing people. But I think there's something magical about the theatre that is the live element to it. You just can't match that. You create it and there's no one else in the way. With TV, there's so many other people in the way, not only executives and producers and target groups, and you test it and then you're changing it and people snip away at it and editors and all the rest of it. But on the theatre, it's like, this is what you're getting. This is it with your other actors. And there is something really thrilling about that. And I like the danger of it. And I like that it changes every night, hopefully.
You have been in some of the greatest and most loved UK and US television shows. Forsyte Saga, Foyle's War, Downton Abbey, The Crown, Bridgerton, Smash, Nightfall, and then there's so many. The Forsyte Saga, You play Val Darty. I watched an episode last week. You are Damian Lewis's nephew.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Amazing cast.
Yeah, lovely cast.
And that looked to me as if that was your first big moment in TV.
I think Foyle's War predated that. Foyle's War was like my first TV job.
I watched the one where you play Michael Kitchen's son.
That's right, yeah.
You're a pilot.
Foyle,
and there's the episode where your co-pilot or fellow pilot he's in love with you and pushes his girlfriend down the stairs.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, that's good.
But it was really fresh still.
Yeah. It was a really well-made, an amazing cast of actors. I mean, like every film, you look at the list of people who were in it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I remember like the first episode, like James McAvoy, Ros Pike. We had a whole range of really interesting, really good people, always, because it was a quality thing. I think it was voted like the number one for sort of TV shows of the last 30 or 40 years. It was the most popular show, which is incredible. So for me, just starting off in that kind of environment and starting with Michael, who played my dad, who's a consummate screen actor, really, really knows what he's doing. It was a great start for me. And then it led on to other period dramas.
Yes. So then it was the Forsyte Saga after that. Again, fantastic cast.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you about Downton Abbey, because that was the television show that we'd all gather on a Sunday, along with millions of others to watch. You were Charles Blake, who turned Lady Mary's head for a while.
Couple of years, yeah.
I rewatched the scene where you rescued the pigs, which is such a lovely scene.
Yeah.
How did that part come about?
I think I auditioned for the pilot or the first episode. I can't remember which part, though. It didn't go anywhere. But sometimes you audition, then you don't really know if down the line it pays off somewhere. Yeah, they phoned me up after Dan Stevens left, and asked whether I'd be interested in it. And it wasn't like a straight offer, but they wanted me to come and meet Michelle Dockery, who plays Lady Mary, and see whether we get on, whether there was chemistry. I always find that ridiculous, the whole chemistry thing. Because that's my job. That's my job, to kind of have chemistry. Whatever chemistry means, that is like...
because you're an actor, so you can create the chemistry.
I can do that with anyone. I mean, it's like, for me, it's just reacting to someone. But anyway, they have this ridiculous sort of thing. And we got on great. She was a fantastic actress and a great, great person. And we immediately got on, and they offered me a role. And it's lovely to be in a show that is watched, obviously, and talked about, because there are so many shows nowadays. Yeah, I felt a real privilege, really. And it was a lovely, lovely group of people. But it's weird coming into a show that's in season 3, was it, or something?
Season 4,
Season 4, was it? Yeah. So already, you're coming into a family that is very, very... already very well established. And also a show that has suddenly become a thing. That adds another level of, I don't know what it is about it, but I felt a little bit of an outsider to start with. Like the first day I was there, they got back that morning. They'd flown back that morning, I think in a private jet, from the correspondence dinner at the White House, because the Obamas Michelle Obama was obsessed with the show. They flew 10 of them to the dinner and back again, so that they were back in time for filming the next day. That's not normal.
No.
That's not normal. It took a bit of time to kind of feel kind of like you belonged, and you were like...
Yes.
It also is quite a difficult show, because there's so many characters and you get your tiny little bits, and the way that Julian wrote was very much like a mosaic. So you had to sort of build it up with a couple of lines here, a couple of lines there, and maybe a scene, and then it would develop in that way, rather than having big, long stretches.
Do you all have to be there all the time?
No.
So you just get...
Well, it depends. I mean, if you're doing one of those terrible dinner scenes where there's 18 people around a table, it's torture, because you have to do it from all angles and everyone's reactions and everyone's close-ups and all the rest of it. And then all the butlers and everything around.
Yes.
It's like it takes forever. And also dressed in all that stuff with the lights and all the rest of it.
So
you can
sweating.
imagine Maggie Smith. She is over it. So it's quite tedious, those kind of scenes. And everyone dreaded those scenes. But, I mean, look, certainly for the people who were on it the whole time, I mean, a life-changing experience. And it was really, really fun.
Bridgerton.
Yeah.
You're Sir Henry Granville, an artist who shows Benedict Bridgerton the
Which is
more
ironic,
fun
because I
side of life.
can't draw at all. I'm the worst person to have on a Pictionary team.
So that was, as you mentioned before, a very young cast.
Very young.
So how did that change the whole experience of filming?
There was an energy about that show that was different, I think. I think that the way that it was cast was different. It was an American take on a period drama. And I'd done a lot of period dramas by that stage, and I'd taken myself to America because I didn't want to do any more period drama, and tried to do lots of other different kind of things and stretch myself in different ways. But sort of coming back and doing something like that, it was different. I mean, I enjoyed it very much because I felt like it was trying something new. It was very American in terms of the way it was put together. And you felt like you were a very, very small part in something. There was going to be a lot of editing, shall we say that?
Yes.
A lot of kind of massaging of the sort of material. I don't think anyone really knew what it was, certainly at the beginning. No one had a clue. And it was like, is this going to work? The costume seemed crazy, and what kind of music are they going to be like? And what is this world? And of course, lightning in a bottle, it suddenly sort of worked for various reasons, I think. And the stuff that I was doing, I quite enjoyed, because I thought it was sort of, in a way, the most interesting kind of element of the world, of the sort of people who were who weren't able to be themselves and who had to play a role in that kind of world.
Yes.
And I sort of wanted to do more of that. But I think the character that I worked with, one of the brothers who I was working with, wonderful actor Luke Thompson, who played, was it Benedict? Is it
Yes,
Benedict?
Benedict.
Yeah. I think there was a world in which that character would have continued his sexual kind of exploration and maybe would have turned out gay. Played a lot of gay roles in my time, maybe less so now, because playing a gay role now, if you're straight or if you're considered to be straight, it's like...
It's highly criticised.
You get criticised for it.
I know, which is kind of crazy because you're an actor. You're supposed to be pretending to do something.
Don't get me started. I mean, look, there are obviously roles that should be played by people who identify as black. I get it.
Yes.
Obviously. It's pretty obvious. And walks of life that are not being represented. And I think the business is doing its best to try and balance those things out, which is really good. But it's gone mad.
It has gone mad.
It's gone like... You're playing a murderer. Do you have any experience of being a murderer? Oh, well, sorry about that. I'm not interested.
I know.
You're in prison. Have you been in prison? I haven't. Oh, dear. Well, we're really looking for someone who's had at least 3 or 4 years in incarceration to really bring authenticity to this role.
The Crown. You play the real person, play Bobby Kennedy.
Oh, yes. I'm hardly in it, so I feel sort of embarrassed. Although I have played both Kennedys now, which I'm proud of. And yeah, I was Stephen Daldry, who I'd done a little bit of work with before on something else, and he asked whether I would do it. And I thought it was going to be slightly bigger than it was, but it was fun anyway, fun nonetheless. And that show is, incredible.
It was an incredible show. Again, incredible cast, a set beyond all sets. But I wondered, having been involved in it and also your father being the Queen's vicar for 15 years, did you feel that it was fair?
As far as I can remember, my dad talking to them about it, or maybe I heard it from someone else, I think they realised that it was entertainment. Some of the facts, some of them might be true, but a lot of it was just hearsay and making it fit into a 50-minute episode. I think that it was certainly good drama, and it tried to be empathetic, and it tried to kind of let the audience into a world that is not straightforward, that's not black and white. And I think that the experiences I didn't have a huge amount of experience with the royal family really, but I think one was when I had dealings with them, I think one was struck by the fact that they were real human beings, because you didn't get a lot from the Queen, I suppose.
Yes.
I remember one time, this is a real showbiz story, but I'm going to tell it anyway.
Oh, good.
I need some humour in this. I got called up by Andrew Lloyd Webber one afternoon, and he said, do you want to come to my house and do some after-dinner entertainment? I was like, oh, I don't... yeah, and I was like, part of me was like, no, but okay, maybe tell me more about it. And I remember the date clashed with, I think it was like the World Cup, and it clashed with an England qualifier. And he said, well, I've got the Queen coming for supper, and we need some people to do some entertainment afterwards. So I was like, okay. So off I went to his house to do this thing and sang some songs. And it was me, and I think I was a magician, and Gary Barlow on the thing. I'd performed for the Queen before, so I knew what to expect. And I knew,
You performed at Windsor Castle, didn't you?
I did some birthday stuff for her 95th, but I can't remember, one of the birthdays, which was an amazing experience, just for the family. But this was like, in a way, she was on show because it wasn't just the family, it was other people, even though obviously Andrew knows her quite well. But I knew what to expect. And as an audience member, she's not like she's there going, oh, wonderful, or laughing. She just doesn't give you anything at all.
Right.
So you did your thing. But Gary's sure he'd done like royal performances before, but I'd maybe not like this, where you're basically within touching distance of the Queen. And he couldn't work out why he was going through hit after hit after hit, why she wasn't getting up and like dancing, and like by the end he was like almost like giving her a lap dance, We Light My Fire, and all the bodyguards were like, ah! He was desperate to get some kind of reaction. They used to come to our house after a carol service every year, and it sounds crazy, doesn't it? And then you sort of saw them up close in an environment where they were much more relaxed. And my father certainly witnessed a huge amount of stuff with them. Was there when the Queen Mother died. He was there with Diana dying. A really, really interesting window into that world. There was a time when they were up at Balmoral Castle, the weekend after Diana died, when, I don't know whether you remember, like the flag hadn't been
And
drop
put to
down, half mast.
Yes.
Remember that whole thing?
Yes.
And Tony Blair calls the Queen. Well, it's in the film.
Yes.
In the film The Queen with Helen Mirren. And I remember going to see that film. I was working in New York on Broadway at the time, and I took my parents, who hadn't been to the cinema for like 40 years, I took them to the cinema to watch the film because I knew that they'd had a sort of, in a way, part of it. Yes. They were at that lunch when she took the call.
Right, wow.
And I remember my mum, we were sitting there watching this scene. She turned to me and she went, well, I don't know who researched this film, but we didn't have salmon for lunch. We had chicken. They had an amazing insight into that world. But all the things I see of Charles, he seems like a really good person, and especially with young people, a real wanting to understand and wanting to help.
How lovely. And what more can you possibly want than that?
A man full of empathy. And I think leaders, which I suppose he is one, they're short on the ground. I think we're lucky in that respect.
Nightfall, last one.
Right.
Well, it's not the last one, but it's the last one of this, of this section.
Right, yeah, okay.
You're playing a truly odious character in this.
Yes, yeah. I've moved into sort of really horrible, I played villains, really nasty, ghastly people now.
How are you enjoying the switch?
Much better.
Well, I guess it must be because you can really get stuck into these.
Boring romantic leads are really dull. Really, really boring. It's like I'm so glad to be out of that world and just playing really interesting, twisted... Sounds crazy, doesn't it?
He is super twisted, this one. And you play him very, very well. And he, again, was a real person, wasn't he?
Yeah, William de Nogaret was a real person. He was Machiavellian in many ways, a brilliant mind, engineered the end of the Knights Templar that the show was about, the end of the Knights Templar. It's really interesting to play someone like that, a historical figure, trying to make him believable and, sympathetic. I found quite a lot of sympathy with him. He had a real allergy to religion. Funny, being a child of a vicar, but I think a lot of our problems in today's society is to do with religion and the power of religion and the corruption of religion. So I was able to, in a way, to hook into that. Someone who wanted power and wanted to take power away from the church. I thought, it was a fascinating world.
Yes, very bloodthirsty. The production itself was sort of very much sort of Game of Thrones vibes, and without the dragons. But it was really bloody
heavy,
and brutal.
Heavy on that kind of world, a lot of riding and horses and swords and a lot of blood. So it was really fun. We shot it in Prague. If you go riding now on a film or TV, you have to do lots of health and safety. You must make sure you're able to do it. In Prague, you just rock up to the stables on the films and they go, do you want to ride today? And you go, yeah. If you weren't filming, you'd be able to go to the studios and just go riding for a couple of hours on these amazing horses because they all needed exercising. So we would just do that. And it was just the best fun. And working on horseback, I really enjoy because you stop thinking about the lines. You're just thinking of, I've got to stay on it and I've got to get to that castle gate. And then I've got to turn around and go somewhere else. And so you're working with this amazing animal and just stop thinking about all the other stuff that gets into your mind when you're acting. It was great fun. Great living in Prague for 6 months at a time. Really fun. Yeah.
And great cast again.
Lovely cast of people.
Carson was the Pope.
Jim Carter, that's right. Yeah. Really nice bunch of guys.
The Sound of Music, for those who haven't seen it, this was an ITV special.
Yeah.
It was aired as it was filmed.
Yes.
And your Maria was Cara Toynton.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
You were Captain Von Trapp.
Yes.
I would have thought the most difficult format imaginable because you are used to film and TV where you have cameras everywhere, but you can take several takes. You're used to theatre where it's live, but you don't have a camera or several in your face at all times.
Yes.
Whereas here you're singing live as well, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah,
the whole thing is live.
Yes, all live.
How did you find that format?
I always forget I did this thing. I don't know why. It's always sort of like, oh, yes, I remember doing that. And it was terrifying in many respects because it was all live. And shooting a film live is ridiculously unnatural and kind of crazy.
Yes.
Really, thinking of the sort of infrastructure you have to have and all the technical requirements you have to have. We took over a whole studio, 3mm studio, and we had 7 or 8 sound stages. And in the commercial breaks, we would run or get on a golf cart, and it was raining. There were like a whole brigade of people making sure that we weren't rained on when we were going from the bedroom set to the out, the gardens or whatever. And it was, for a lot of time for TV, you don't get an awful lot of rehearsal. You turn up and you have maybe, 10 or 15 minutes with the director, if that, and then you're shooting the scene. But doing something like that, we rehearsed for a long, long time. And also we had a lot of kids in that show. So we had to be drilled. And then we had, 12, 15 steady cam operators. And so there was a technical dance off camera as there was on camera. And it was an amazing experience. I'm not quite sure what the purpose of it was in the sense that, it was never going to be as opulent and as beautiful as the film, because the film is brilliant. Because it's not in a theatre, you're not going to get necessarily the feeling that it's live for an audience, because there isn't an audience that's responding, you can hear responding next to you. But as a sort of exercise and as a sort of thing, it was kind of amazing. And it won a BAFTA, and it was an event, I suppose. And I loved it. I remember the last bit when you're in the Abbey. We're about to escape up the mountain over into Switzerland, although that's geographically wrong, because we would have actually been going into Germany over the mountains, but no one mentions that. And the director, she'd just done Climb Every Mountain, and she's about to send us off. We're all like, oh my God, we got to the end. No one really fucked up. No one, it was not like, there were no massive technical hitches. No, we didn't have to cut to a commercial because someone's dress had got caught or someone, I don't know, caught fire or whatever might have happened. And I remember she deliberately didn't tell us what would happen at the end. And as we walked out of the back, it started to snow. It didn't happen in like the 2 dress rehearsals. It started to snow.
Well, we mean quite tearful.
It was. And it was like we were both, I remember carrying like 2 of the kids. I barely got up, like 10 meters. I was like, it was great. I will never, ever forget it. It was a really, really great experience.
Well, I think if you can do that, you can do anything. Concerts. You've sung with the New York Philharmonic, the London Philharmonic, the BBC Concert Orchestra. I mean, you've sung with so many different orchestras. You've sung at Carnegie Hall, the Royal Albert Hall. You've performed the Proms, Windsor Castle, we've touched on. Again, I'm just naming a few. Amongst all of these, could you just talk about one evening that stands out?
I've had some amazing opportunities as a singer. Singing the sort of music that I love, which is sort of the music of the 40s, the 50s and the 60s as well, particularly American music, American musical theatre from the golden age, but also stuff like Bacharach and Henry Mancini and Johnny Mandel and those kind of singers, 60s and 70s, I suppose. And the first record that I made was kind of in that world of Jimmy Webb and...
So If You Stay.
Yeah, that kind of world. So singing with a really big orchestra is always a thrill. I recently did, over New Year's, I did a concert with the Stockholm Symphony Orchestra, which is a 100-piece orchestra.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was with my friend John Wilson, who's an amazing conductor, who's probably the best in the world for that kind of repertoire. And I'm singing, it's just me and an orchestra, so it's like 20 songs or something like that. And it's just so fun. It is so fun. Because nowadays, if you're doing a musical, you're lucky to get 12 people in a pit.
Yes.
And even in a concert format at the festival hall, for that kind of music, maybe 35 if you're lucky. But to have 100, it's just an amazing thing. This wall of sound, like having 30, 40 strings. It's a different feeling. So those kind of things I love. But I mean, I did a concert recently at the Cadogan Hall with just a trio. And that's the other sort of thing, slightly more jazz, but I wouldn't call myself a jazz singer, but it's slightly more that kind of world. And that was sort of going through kind of composers that I've sort of had dealings with or have shaped my life in some way, and more about songwriters. And then I got my son, who's 15, who's a songwriter himself, and he did a number, which was great.
That must be so...
Yeah, so that was a very special...
To have him on stage.
Yeah, that was a special for different reasons. We shared a dressing room, and it was his sort of professional debut, I suppose. So we shared a dressing room, and he did his homework in the first half while I was on stage. And he was much, much calmer than I was. He was just like...
Just got up and did it.
Got up and did it. Not really like, 1,200 people or whatever. We did it in Chichester the night before, and it was like, that's a big house. That's a big theatre. Just comes on stage, says, right, I'm going to do this song. This is what it's about. Gets something done and just does it.
I'm so envious of someone who can do that. So do you still get nervous?
Yeah.
Always?
Always.
And how do you deal with your nerves?
I do a lot of pacing around. I wish I was better at it, and I should be better at it, I suppose, by now. But you have to be nervous to some degree. You have to have that feeling of what's going to happen. But it's about managing the nerves. Sports people talk about envisaging it, visualizing how you want something to go. And having the nerves sort of gives an extra sense of awareness, I suppose.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Of trying to stay in the moment, of not being carried away by your nerves and then not being in control. And to a certain degree, you want to be in a sense of flow. That's what we're aiming for as an artist or as a sportsman, that feeling where you're just doing things and it's just flowing through you. Very, very hard to get. And every now and then you find it. But nerves are a part of that process. So I think you want to be as relaxed as possible, of course, but also with a certain sense of heightened awareness.
Have they ever overtaken you?
Oh, yes. Often first shows or whatever, you have to pick up fairly recently I did a production of South Pacific, and the first scene is me kind of making, is it a cup of tea or a cup of coffee for Nellie Forbush in the first scene on the top of this plantation. And you're asking whether she wants sugar, and she says, five lumps or something like that. And just the art of having to pick a sugar cube up with the tongs and put like 5 cubes in the space of like 10 seconds or 8 seconds, the time you have before you have your next line or the next bit of song or whatever. I remember the first night, you're just like, the audience can see that you have no control over your lips whatsoever. It's impossible. And then by, show 30, it's like you're just falling off a log. But it's important to have those sort of things, those feelings.
So you've released 5 albums, If You Stay, Be My Love,
yes,
celebrating the great American songbook composers, Cole Porter, George Gershwin, done Christmas at Downton. And I listened to that thinking, well, who else is singing on this? Because it was just you. I thought it was going to be every cast member.
No, that's not true. Elizabeth McGovern, I think I do a duet with Elizabeth somewhere along the line, which is...
Yes, you do. But apart from that, thank goodness they had you in it.
It's a ridiculous, cynical... I mean, I don't mind saying it's a ridiculous, cynical, but purely for the American market. It's slightly embarrassing, but I think it did sell like a ridiculous amount of copies.
I'm sure it did.
Nothing sells anymore unless you're Adele. And this sold like 300,000 copies, which is unheard of. So every now and then I get £2.57 royalty.
We should get a lot more than that since it was you.
Yeah, well, as if, unfortunately.
You also have sung at the movies.
Yes,
right?
Rodgers and Hammerstein CD, yeah.
And also Together at a Distance, where you sang with Sierra Boggess.
Oh, yes, so that's a record I made at lockdown where we did it. I taught myself how to record properly with music programs in the sort of weeks that we were just sitting at home doing nothing. And we made a record. It was just a hobby thing. We were just, let's do this song. And then I somehow made a track or got a track from someone. And then we sang along to it, karaoke style, even though she was in New York and I was in London. And then, we did it. And then it was bought by a company and a label. And then we released it, which was one of the great things that happened in lockdown for me. It was great.
Both my daughters are singer-songwriters. Obviously, your son is too.
Yes.
Having been in this field for a while now, what advice would you give to young singers trying their luck?
It's tricky. It's not an excuse when one says, well, there's so many people doing it. It's such a crowded marketplace. The competition is competitive. It was always competitive. There's always other people doing it. But there's no one doing it who's you. I say to people who are starting out as actors or musicians, I think it's just try and understand that what's inside you and what makes you do what you do is really the most important thing. And if you can tap into that in the most concentrated way, then you're going to have a chance of being able to do it as a living. If you're passionate enough and dedicated enough and willing to be rejected pretty much every day.
Yes.
I'm nearly 50 and I deal with rejection certainly every week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week still.
Even now?
Yeah, I'm still auditioning. I'm still getting told, no, you're not this, you're too that, all the time, for the most ridiculous reasons and stuff that I don't even know. So it's like, how much do you want to put yourself in that place? You have to have a certain amount of thick skin. And I think that's the most important thing, really, is we all imitate to a certain degree, especially when we're young. We all go, I love this person and I'm going to sound a little bit like that. whether it's conscious or subconscious.
Yes.
One's influences, really...
You feel you can't sing a song unless you sing it like how they was originally sung.
Yeah, but because the way that the world is nowadays and because we've got so much information, we get diverted too easily, thinking that we have to be like someone else who's successful. And really, the great artists of our time, the great writers, the great filmmakers, are people who trod their own path and who were brave enough to do that, irrespective of the fact that they might have looked unpopular. They might not have had a massive following. They might be doing something that was completely illogical, irrational, but to them it made sense.
Yeah.
And I think that really is the most important. Yeah, there's a whole lot of work, and I understand all the social media stuff and all the things of trying to get your work seen, because how do you get your work seen now that there are very few opportunities for young people? How do you learn how to act on stage? It's not easy for young actors. It really isn't. There's not like the same infrastructure there was even when I was starting out, let alone 40 years ago when there was repertory theatre and a well-trodden path. Nowadays, how do you do it? Because most actors don't even get on stage. It's really, really difficult. So much stuff in the way of the actual doing of the thing. And that's the most important thing, the actual doing it and finding why you're doing it and what it is inside of yourself that you want to show.
Yes.
I'm still working it out, but I've been lucky because I feel like I'm doing lots of different things which push me into different worlds. And I hope I continue to do that for the rest of my life, because for me, it's a very rich life, not particularly rich financially, but rich in all the other things that are more important.
Former guest on the show is this young guy called Henry Rowley. I don't know if you've come across him. He's a stand-up comedian. He's 26 years old. He is a TikToker as well. He does sketches of posh girl on her gap year, creepy teacher, things like that. He's brilliantly funny. And when I asked him about fans, he said, it's great, but the tricky ones are the gropey mums, is what he said. And I thought, oh dear, that's really how unpleasant, because I'm a mum. I'm not a gropey one, but I'm a mum, it's like to say, and how awful that they would do that. In your career, doing all these different things, and given you have been so successful and you don't look horrible, what's the worst thing a fan has done?
Well, I took myself off social media, really, because I was sick and tired of strange, weird stuff people would send me. People also imitating you, so they'd imitate you and then send messages pretending to be you to other people. So that side of things...
Oh, that's awful.
Yes, terrible flip side of the power of social media, and I can't bear it. Maybe it's sort of detrimental to my work. I can't be my own publicist. I'm too English. Most American people I work with, they seem to be brilliant at it. That whole world is sort of alien to me, and I just can't tell people what I'm eating for breakfast or what fitness regime I'm doing. And I just can't. I'm laughing at myself too hard, being too disgusted with myself. Feel dirty to even begin to do that.
Okay.
Generally speaking, I've had amazing experiences with people who are, particularly people who have been moved by what I've done or excited or enjoy it. And at the end of the day, those are the people that I guess keeping you in work to some degree. And you do get the odd weird... There was a letter I got when I was fairly young, and I think he did send it to quite a few people, but there was a man who used to send a very beautifully typed letter noting all the things that he'd enjoyed watching. And then he'd get to the end of the letter, yours sincerely, Raymond Summer, P.S. Would you mind sending me a photograph of your knees?
Your knees?
Yeah.
Did you?
No.
What you did?
Like I had one of those lying around. No, but I mean, Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah, so very odd things that people will... And people think they know you, and then so there's sometimes a weird over-familiarity on that sort of thing, which is totally fine and quite nice. It's not unpleasant to someone comes up into your street and goes, oh, by the way, I loved you in whatever it is. I mean, it's nice. It's a nice thing to happen. You feel honoured to sort of find that connection with people through music, through art. That's why we do it, really, to make sense of the world and make sense of our lives. That's why it helps. It really helps people, which is great.
Yeah. Jeff Rawle, I don't know if you've acted with him. He's been in loads of things, but maybe his most famous role was Amos Diggory in Harry Potter.
Okay.
And he talked about being in a he said it was actually a really shitty production, that he was given a bottle of wine at the end for doing it. But anyway, but it was a long time ago, and he had a moment of hilarity where he started laughing on stage, and he dived behind a sofa with this guy, Michael Maloney was his...
Oh, I know Michael. I did my first job with Michael Maloney. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, so Michael Maloney...
Yeah, terrible corpse, sir. He would turn his back to the audience, really badly behaved.
Okay,
Great actor.
So,
terribly behaved.
So maybe he did this on this particular moment because the two of them ended up diving behind the sofa,
right. Yeah,
and then
wonderful.
the rest of the cast around had to just come up with something. Every time they thought they'd stick their heads up and carry on, they just couldn't do it. So they were there for a long time.
Wonderful.
Has anything like that happened to you?
Oh, yes, many times. I mean, we live for those moments of just like excruciating horror and hysteria, because they're just, you think back on them thinking, oh, God, that's what life's about. I did a show with Nathan Lane on Broadway, and the first scene was we were playing university professors. He would be on stage and I would walk in. And on Broadway, there's this ridiculous thing where if you're a famous actor, you get a round of applause at the beginning of the show whenever you make your entrance.
Okay.
Which is ridiculous.
So if you're in a
show with Nathan Lane, he comes in, he gets a round of applause. When you come in, deathly silence. Not great.
Sure,
it's not great. It's not great for your ego. Anyway, so he comes on, does his thing, and I come on, and he sort of reordered stuff on my desk. That's part of the shtick for the beginning of the show. I get my suitcase, my briefcase, and I unpack my briefcase. And it was Christmas Eve or near Christmas. I remember that. And I can see there's something going on. He's got a twinkle in his eye. He's a genius actor. Anyway, he comes on, does his thing, and I come on, I got my briefcase, and I put the briefcase down, I open the briefcase, and my briefcase, instead of being full of like textbooks, stationery, it's full of like a Christmas cracker, half a leg of chicken. It's like a present wrapped up. And he's sitting there, leaning back in his chair, just looking at me, knowing that I have to make the scene work with all this shit that he's packed into my briefcase. It was just...
So what did you do?
I just had to I was like,
You kept it together.
Somehow. But he could make people laugh. He's a genius. I don't know whether you ever saw him in The Producers, but I mean, in The Producers, he was one of the greatest performers I've ever seen. He would get laughs. He would get like 3 or 4 laughs a line. Amazing comedian. But he would do things on stage that were just like sometimes just jaw-droppingly funny. But I've had many experiences where you're really not supposed to laugh and you just cannot keep it together. Audiences love that stuff. When something goes wrong, they see actors having to struggle, they just love it.
Actually, it's not the end of the world then. Well,
no, I remember like My Right Night with Reg, for example, we had to open a bottle of champagne and none of us, there's 3 of us on stage, we couldn't open it. And we kept going. And like the show basically stopped because the audience just could not stop laughing. In the end, I remember giving it to Simon Russell Beale was in the first front row, and I remember giving it to Simon and goes, "You have a go."
That's brilliant.
But that sort of stuff, when suddenly it's real, it's like you could see suddenly it's great. It's nothing better.
Having acted with all these fellow amazing actors, Gillian Anderson, Maggie Smith, and I'm coming up with the ladies here, Michelle Dockery, Emma Watson, Lily James, who has brought the best out of your acting skills?
I've been lucky with lots of there's so many different types of actor. And I think as actors, the first thing we stop doing as actors is listening, because we're often just so preoccupied with what we're saying, what we're doing, and how we're coming across, that we forget that all the information that is vital is the information that the other person is giving us.
Right. Yes.
So we stop listening. And every now and then you work with an actor who is just entirely listening. It's quite rare. It really is quite rare, because it takes a lot of courage just to go, I'm just going to look at you and I'm just going to respond to what you're saying. I know what I'm going to say. I don't know how I'm going to say it, but I know that you're going to give the information which is going to unlock this line that I'm about to say. And to work with those kinds of people, and I don't want to name names, but there are a few people that I feel like it's such a joy when that sort of thing happens, because then it feels like a dance. And it doesn't happen on screen often because of the nature of screen acting and the technicalities of it, and the fact that you don't rehearse a lot, and you're coming into a scene, maybe play a love scene with someone you barely know, and you have to be really intimate. And it's a weird stuff that goes on in those sort of things. Or something that's really, really technical, like a fight scene, or like a big monologue on stage, or stuff that requires different parts of your brain. But certainly the experiences that I've had where you're both sort of moving, I don't know, around each other and really, really listening, those are the experiences that I really, really, really love. And that's one of the reasons why the collaboration and the communication, the connection, I absolutely adore of the process. And I have worked with loads of people who are really good at that. And I'm trying to get better at it, I think. But it's interesting. It's the first thing one forgets to do.
Fantastic advice. Given what you said earlier, what would you say to your 10-year-old self?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose that it's going to be okay. To take it back to what we were talking about right at the beginning of the thing, that what does Barack Obama say about the arc of history, the arc of justice? It's like good will prevail, truth will prevail at some stage. And what we're all dealing with at the moment is misinformation, disinformation, too much trauma, too much bad news. And I suppose the message of hope and the message of love and honesty, kindness, I think that's probably what I would say, I guess.
It's good. It's great. You've just finished filming and you're now having a break now.
Yeah, I've got no idea. I mean, there's various things that might happen, but until you're standing there doing it, you never really know whether anything's going to happen. There are a few projects that are in various stages of funding in terms of screen work. And then there's a couple of shows that might happen later on this year. Some concerts, definitely. I'd like to make another record at some stage. My career is a patchwork of all sorts of things. And people know me from different things. And they go, oh, I didn't realize you did that. No one sees everything you do. It's nice to surprise people and nice to do different things.
I have had such a lovely time looking at different things you've been in and listening to your music. It's been wonderful. It's been such a treat. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Bandwidth Conversations. Thanks to Anna B, Head of Marketing, to all at the podcast consultant, to Bagawire for the music, to the Money Maze podcast. Thank you for listening. Any feedback, please email me, katie@bandwidthconversations.com. Please sign up on our website, www.bandwidthconversations.com, so we can notify you about new podcast releases. We hope to see you again soon.